Good morning, and welcome to the online Sunday service of the Unitarian Universalist Church of Urbana-Champaign. I am Sam Bashirs from the Worship Committee, coming to you live from our sanctuary this morning. It's cold and windy, and I hope you did not slip on the ice yesterday or this morning, and I hope when writing the date you remember it's 2022. We are a church of many theologies, a justice-centered, multi-faith congregation that values deeds above creeds, a religious community that strives to build beloved community in the here and now. You may be joining us today from across the world or from just down the street. Wherever you are, please know that this community, this service is here for you in whatever form you find us. If you want to follow along with a written order of service, you can find that link just below this video on our website. Today's service is brought to you by Chris Hanauer and myself with a host of contributions from others. As one of our practices together each Sunday, we begin with a land acknowledgement of the indigenous nations of this land. Wherever you are listening, please bring to mind the indigenous peoples of your place. There will be a moment of silence after the acknowledgement, and in that silence, I invite you to consider something you might do beyond this honoring to make a difference for Native nations today. We recognize and acknowledge that we gather today on indigenous land, taken through deception, coercion, and violence. We acknowledge the continued displacement and oppression of Native peoples and honor their commitments to survival, identity, and the protection of our world. Thank you.
Good morning. Our opening words this morning are from a recent opinion piece in the New York Times by David Brooks. There is always a lot of suffering in the world, and over the past few years we have seen high tides of despair. The sources of people's pain may be different: grief, shame, exhaustion, heartbreak, physical or mental health issues, but they almost always involve some feeling of isolation, of being cut off from others. Suffering can make people self-centered, loveless, humorless, and angry. But we all know cases where suffering didn't break people, but broke them open, made them more caring toward and knowledgeable about the suffering of others. And the old saying that we suffer our way to wisdom is not wrong. We often learn more from the hard times than the happy ones. Please join us now in our unison chalice lighting. Sam will light our chalice here, and I hope many of you are lighting yours at home.
Our chalice lighting words this morning were written by Emily Dickinson. Hope is the thing that perches in the soul. Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all.
Can I see another's woe and not be in sorrow too? Can I see another's grief and not seek for kind relief? Can I see a falling tear and not feel my sorrow's share? Can a father see his child weep nor be with sorrow filled? Can a mother sit and hear infant
morning, everyone. My name is Rose St. Clair, and I'm the coordinator for religious exploration and engagement here at UUCUC. This morning, I would like to share with you the story about the Uncorker of ocean bottles. And as I share this story with you, I invite you to consider what message you might wish to find in an ocean bottle, or what message you might write and send off to someone else. The Uncorker of ocean bottles lived alone on a high spot with only one tree for shade. They always kept their eyes on the waves, watchful for a glint of glass. You see, they had a job of the utmost importance. It was their task to open any bottles found at sea and make sure they were delivered. Sometimes to deliver a bottle, they needed only to stroll to the nearest village. Other times they would journey until their compass became rusty and they felt loneliness as sharp as fish scales. Sometimes the messages were very old, crunchy like leaves in the fall. Sometimes the messages were written by a quill dipped in sadness. But most of the time they make people quite happy, for a letter can hold the treasure of a clam-hugged pearl. While the Uncorker of ocean bottles loved their job, they couldn't help but wonder if they would ever receive a letter. Truth be told, each time they opened a bottle, a part of them hoped to see their own name winking from the top of the page. But then they remembered this was about as likely as finding a mermaid's toenail on the beach, for they had no name, no friends. They stank of seaweed and salt and fishermen's feet. No one would ever write them a letter, but still they would have liked it just the same. One day, the waves tipped their white postman's hat to the Uncorker and delivered a bottle with a very peculiar letter inside. "I'm not sure you'll get this in time," it read, "but I am having a party tomorrow evening at the seashore. Will you please come?" "Oh dear," said the Uncorker. They had no idea who the letter was for or where to deliver it, but the truth is they were very curious. They had never been invited to a party before, and they suspected they might like to go. First, they visited the maker of cakes. "Pardon me," said the Uncorker, "but do you recognize this prince?" The cake maker studied the notes. "Nope, I don't recognize it," they finally said, "but oh, how I love a seaside dance." So the Uncorker moved on. They asked the candy shop owner. They asked a woman buying chocolate-dipped treats. They asked a young girl in a green dress. "Sorry," each one said, "though I do wish I had received an invitation to such a party." The Uncorker asked a seagull, a sailor, and a one-man band, but nobody could claim the letter. Nobody in the sky or sand or sea. The Uncorker felt very low. This was the first time they had been unable to deliver a message. As they fell asleep that night, the Uncorker decided to go to the seashore the next day. They would go and apologize to the writer of the note. The Uncorker of ocean bottles arrived early, carrying a handful of their favorite seashells. They thought it might be rude to show up uninvited and empty-handed. The seashore was draped in seaweed and starfish. Candles floated in clamshells. There were sand sculptures and umbrellas. "It's you," said the maker of cakes. "How grand," said the candy shop owner. The other guests had arrived already. A woman, a girl in a green dress, a seagull, a sailor, and a one-man band. When the girl in green asked the Uncorker of ocean bottles to dance, they said, "I'm not sure I know how, but I'd like to just the same." As they spun across the beach to the water's edge and back again, everyone smiled and kept the beat. The Uncorker's heart was a glass vessel filled to the brim. As the stars began to arrive and the moon as well, the Uncorker took out the bottle they had been unable to deliver. "Perhaps," they said, their mouth full of cake. "Yes, perhaps I shall try to deliver this again tomorrow."
We as Unitarian Universalists acknowledge that we are part of the sacred web of life, the web of our connections with each other, with the wider community, and with the world. In the spirit of connections with each other, a reminder that we will have our online fellowship hour starting at 11:30. Also in that spirit, each Sunday we share half of our Sunday offering with an organization in alignment with our UU values. This month's shared offering is the Refugee Center, whom whom we supported for more than 35 years when they occupied our building. Over the years, the Refugee Center, formerly known as the East Central Illinois Refugee Mutual Assistance Center, or ESERMAC, expanded its services from helping resettle Vietnamese refugees to providing assistance to all immigrants, political asylees, and refugees, regardless of country of origin. Please see the weekly e-news for more information about the Refugee Center and their current efforts to resettle refugees from Afghanistan, along with news of other announcements and events for the church.
Good morning, everyone. Sam Bashir is here for the Music Committee. Carpe diem means to seize the day, and one of the days that you should seize is February 13th, the day of our next virtual coffee house. Please consider singing a song or playing an instrument, or singing a song and playing an instrument, or tell a story, recite poetry, or maybe you can juggle. Whatever you can do, think about signing up and join the coffee house crowd. We love new and creative performances. Now I need to put on my worship committee hat. The coffee house is about more than entertaining and being entertained. Yes, it is about those things, but there's more to it. A coffee house is a chance to meet other people and introduce yourself to a wider circle of UUs, and sometimes to work closely with others to put on a good show. In short, it's about building community, being present, and sometimes even having a spiritual experience. And it's fun. Think about what you can do and sign up. There's information about sign-ups and other information about the coffee house in the e-news. Hope to see you on the 13th.
Each Sunday, we bring our individual joys, sorrows, and concerns to our time together. Please bring to mind the joys and sorrows in your life as we sing our blessing song. Please sing along or just let it wash over you. There is still time to send in a joy or sorrow to be shared aloud. You will see the email address during the blessing song.
May the long time sun shine upon you. All love surround you, and the pure, pure light that's within you guide your way home. May the long time sun shine upon you. All love surround you, and the pure, pure light that's within you guide your way home. May the long time sun shine upon you. All love surround you, and the pure, pure light that's within you guide your way
Good morning. From Jody Hanger, happy birthday to my amazing husband, Chris. From Sarah Wisseman, a sorrow. Our beloved daughter continues to shun us and her entire family because of a fundamentalist cult in Mississippi. This is the hardest thing we have ever had to bear. From the Herzogs, we are grateful for vaccines and testing that allowed us to safely gather with grandparents over winter break for the first time in 2 years. We are also deeply saddened by the wildfires that tore through neighborhoods with exceptional power and speed just a few miles from where we were in Boulder, Colorado, and which left over 1,000 families with nothing but rubble where their homes once stood. From Sally Fritchie, prayers for healing and relief for Allie Newbold, who had a very difficult week. A joy from Lynn Wiley. We are happy to see Sam's dad, Dan Bashir, home this week from Carle Hospital after a bout of COVID and a subsequent pacemaker implanted to help with his heart rate. May all experiencing breakthrough COVID or any COVID symptoms recover quickly. And from myself, joy that my children, Max and Caroline, were able to come visit this weekend to help celebrate my birthday. Sometimes email gets delayed, and so if I missed reading your joy or sorrow this morning, we will be sure to print it in the e-news this week.
We have a few readings for you this morning. Our first reading comes from user TooMuchPizza393, posted to r/Taylor Swift, the home of all things Taylor Swift on the Reddit internet discussion platform. And this would be a good time to mention that, to my embarrassment, I learned only this morning that Taylor Swift also has a song called Message in a Bottle. But not the one that I'm talking about. Anyway, TooMuchPizza393 writes, I've always found the whole concept of a message in a bottle stunning. Something as delicate as glass and paper traveling for centuries through waves and rocks strong enough to bring down a cargo ship before finally washing up, ready to be discovered by unsuspecting eyes. It is beautiful to me. And I was thinking just now how they are a great metaphor for Taylor's career. For the times the waves have pushed her under the surface, but she's always risen again. For the time her messages were swept out to sea, out of her ownership and control, but have now found their way to her shore again with her re-recordings. The way her words have traveled the world, her reflections she made in her bedroom nearly 2 decades before, sometimes being found as if anew by beachcombers opening up a bottle. And ultimately, the idea is so central to music that our most private, vulnerable pains and joys and love and heartaches that we wonder if anyone else feels are, like the message in a bottle, traveling through the currents of the ocean, something we are never alone in feeling.
I have 2 readings. The first is from a book by Hubert Dreyfus called What Computers Still Can't Do, a critique of artificial reason, originally published in 1972. He writes, It is fitting to begin with a prediction made by Herbert Simon in 1957, as his general problem solver seemed to be opening up the era of artificial intelligence. Simon wrote, The simplest way I can summarize is to say that there are now in the world machines that think, that learn, and that create. Moreover, their ability to do these things is going to increase rapidly until, in the visible future, the range of problems they can handle will be coextensive with the range to which the human mind has been applied. Simon then predicts, among other things, that within 10 years, a digital computer will be the world's chess champion. That within 10 years, a digital computer will discover and prove an important new mathematical theorem. That within 10 years, most theories in psychology will take the form of computer programs or of qualitative statements about the characteristics of computer programs. Unfortunately, the 10th anniversary of Simon's talk in 1967 went unnoticed, and workers in artificial intelligence did not confront these predictions with the actual achievements. Now, in 1972, 14 years have passed, and we are being warned that it may soon be difficult to control our robots. My second reading is from Dune, Messiah by Frank Herbert. In this passage, a Fremen named Farak, an old follower of Paul Atreides, is telling a visitor about his experience on another planet during the jihad fought to conquer the universe. Do you know why I enlisted in the jihad? I heard there was a thing called a sea. It is very hard to believe in a sea when you have lived only here among our dunes. Men of Dune had never known a sea. We collected water for the great change that Muad'Dib is bringing with a wave of his hand. I could imagine a qanat, water flowing across the land in a canal. From this, my mind could picture a river. But a sea? It was too much for my mind to picture, yet men I knew said they had seen this marvel. I thought they lied, and I had to know for myself. It was for this reason that I enlisted. There was a sunset, he said presently. It had red in it, the color of the glass in my bottle. There was golden blue. We came out of a mountain pass where the air was sick with water. I could scarcely breathe it. And there below me was the thing my friends had told me about, water as far as I could see and farther. We marched down to it. I waded out into it and drank. It was bitter and made me ill, but the wonder of it has never left me. I immersed myself in that sea, he said, looking down at the water creatures worked into the tiles of his floor. One man sank beneath that water. Another man arose from it. I felt that I could remember a past which had never been. I stared around me with eyes which could accept anything at all.
Someone gets my message in a bottle. Message in a bottle. A year has passed since I wrote my notes. I should have known right from the start. Only hope can keep me together. Love can mend your life, but love can break your heart. I'll send an SOS to the world. I'll send an SOS to the world. I hope that someone gets my. I hope that someone gets my. I hope that someone gets my message in a bottle. Message in a bottle. Walked out this morning, don't believe what I saw. 100 billion bottles washed up on the shore. Seems we're not alone in being alone. 100 billion castaways looking for a home. I'll send an SOS to the world. I'll send an SOS to the world. I hope that someone gets my. Hope that someone gets my. I hope that someone gets my message in a bottle. Message in a bottle.
Thank you, Laura, for that profound performance. Sam is right. You are amazing. Just a castaway, an island lost at sea. Another lonely day, no one here but me. More loneliness than anyone could bear. Rescue me before I fall into despair. I'll send an SOS to the world. I hope that someone gets my message in a bottle. So opens the song Message in a Bottle, written by the rock musician Sting and a big hit for his band The Police in 1979. Depending on how old you are, these words may be something you overheard your children listening to, or something you overheard your parents listening to. Or, if you're like me, they could be part of a transcendent adolescent experience you had with your best friend one summer night in 1986, watching the rockumentary Bring on the Night, in which Sting performs an achingly beautiful, stripped-down version of the song over the movie's end credits. Something about that performance, combined with the simple and bleak lyrics, burned itself into my 17-year-old brain that night. To this day, I'm not sure why. Images of solitary alienation rarely appeal to teenagers, after all. The metaphor of the message in a bottle is one that is familiar to all of us, and it's easy to see why. We all know the cartoon trope found in easily 1/3 of all New Yorker magazines. The castaway, the postage stamp island, the single palm tree. Bob Mankoff, former cartoon editor of The New Yorker, said in an interview that the first of this cartoon genre appeared in the 1920s, though the metaphor of the castaway and of the message in a bottle is, of course, far older than that. In the tale of the Haika, an epic of medieval Japan, an exiled poet etches verses about his plight onto planks of wood that he then throws into the ocean. History is replete with stories of messages put in bottles, both literal and figurative. I have been drawn back to this song recently for obvious reasons. Certainly in these COVID times, I think we can all relate to loneliness and isolation. In our efforts to protect the vulnerable in our society, most of us have bowed to the necessity of limiting our interactions with friends and family, and of attending any but the most intimate gatherings. Heartbreaking images and stories have assaulted us for 2 years. Confused people drowning in their hospital beds, unable to spend their last moments in the presence of their loved ones. Grandparents unable to meet new grandchildren. Students struggling to learn from teachers and friends while alone in their rooms with their laptops. Life plans driven into the ditch. The comforting, uniting rituals of our democracy torn and battered by demagogues who value only power. And every moment of relief and hard-won optimism followed by a massive reversal in which the statistics of biology, combined with the seemingly inevitable human folly, combine to throw us back down again. The virus has accelerated the process begun by the internet of reducing a society of millions of individuals into millions of individual societies. It is a perfect storm of isolation, and if the countless media think pieces about the rise of emotional problems everywhere are to be believed, we are all feeling it. And when you're stranded and alone, how do you get help? For many, you write down a plea, stuff it into a bottle, and throw it into the sea. The thing is, as a strategy for getting help, it's not really great. And yet I think we are all doing it all the time, even without realizing it. A brief digression to illustrate my point. One of the loneliest times in my life was when I was in 7th grade and my parents were going through a divorce. I don't know why, but my principal emotional reaction to the situation was one of intense denial. I didn't want to talk about it, and I lived in fear that my friends would find out, as if that would make me lesser in their eyes or some kind of freak. And I had plenty of friends whose parents were divorced. Leading up to that, my mother had had a nervous breakdown and had spent several weeks in the Fair Oaks Sanatorium. While there, she met a therapist named Judy, who really helped her out. Mom arranged for my younger sister and me to see Judy so we could talk with a professional, caring adult about what we had been going through. As you might expect from a young, aspiring Tutankhamun, King of denial, get it? I was not excited about this. I was even less excited when it turned out that we would make the trip to Fair Oaks each time in the back of a dumpy cab with a scary-looking driver, since Mom was at work and couldn't take us herself. That my father took no responsibility for these visits goes without saying. Each session followed the same script. Judy would talk alternately to my sister and to me, asking us questions about how we felt. I would listen to her conversation with my sister, and then when it was my turn, I would stubbornly insist that I felt fine about everything, harbored no ill will towards anybody, and could we please be done now? I remember the feeling of relief that came over me as we were wrapping up our last visit, of impatiently waiting for the clock to advance to the point where I would be free of all of this uncomfortable exercise forever. It was then that Judy dropped the bomb on me. I think your sister is doing okay, Chris, but I'd like to meet with you again. I was indignant and asked why she thought this was necessary. I think you're mad at your mom, she said calmly. No, I am not, I insisted. I am not mad at anyone. I think you are, she said implacably. Do you want to know why I think so? Yes, I said, practically daring her to penetrate my shield of emotional invulnerability. Because every time you talk about her, you make a fist and you pound it into your other hand. In that moment, I was completely undone because of course, she was 100% right. Much as I tried to deny it to myself and others, I was furious with my mom and blamed her emotional instability for the impending destruction of our family unit. My method of coping was to loudly proclaim to the world that all was fine, but in retrospect, I realized, as my mom no doubt did as well, that I was busily writing help on pieces of paper, stuffing them into bottles and hurling them into the vast ocean. So what is your version of the fist in the hand? What is your SOS to the world? What messages are you sending out, perhaps unconsciously, to let the world know that you need help? Are you withdrawing from your friends and family, even beyond the requirements of the pandemic? Are you lashing out at people? More benignly, are you maybe eating a little more than you should, or binge watching Ted Lasso? These are all reasonable responses to emotional trauma. The trick is to be aware of them, to be mindful of them, to acknowledge them, and to work to make them unnecessary. But how? Perhaps we should return to Sting's lyrics. Walked out this morning, don't believe what I saw. 100 billion bottles washed up on the shore. Seems I'm not alone in being alone. 100 billion castaways looking for a home. The state of isolation and alienation, he realizes, is universal. This idea is also expressed in one of my favorite messages that we display on our wayside pulpit on Green Street. Be kind, for everyone you meet is fighting a hard battle. If we are able to tune into our own cries for help, then we must also be on the lookout for those sent by others. To do this is hard because it means resisting the urge we all have, and which may be based in our very DNA, to attribute the behavior of others to their fundamental natures rather than to situational circumstances. Psychological studies have shown that we tend to overestimate the role that inherent characteristics play in the behavior of others. For example, when you have an unpleasant interaction with a stranger, you are more likely to assume that they are generally unpleasant rather than to think that maybe you're catching them on a bad day. Similarly, when things go well for us, we tend to think that it's because of our natural worthiness rather than to the situation. I like to remember the late Texas Governor Ann Richards' famous comment about George Bush Sr. He was born on third base and thought he hit a triple. This attribution error, as psychologists call it, is very real and hard to overcome. When I read a story in the News Gazette about criminal behavior, my first mental reaction is nearly always to condemn the criminal for being an evil person. I have to consciously make the effort to stop and ask myself what other things might have been at play in the situation. Which is not, I must stress, to excuse or in any way lessen the magnitude of what that person did, or to suggest that they should not pay the full legal penalty for their crime. It is rather to acknowledge that in any given situation, I don't know what's going through a person's mind, or what external factors may have led them to their fateful decision. Was the crime a desperate message, one presumably preceded by others that were ignored? What if somebody had opened up one of those previous bottles and read its contents? Might things have been different? As I hope I have conveyed, I love the song Message in a Bottle, but I wonder if Sting didn't end it too soon. If the song might have benefited from another verse. Because what do you do when you walk out and find 100 billion bottles washed up on the shore? Do you just walk away, shrugging your shoulders about the inevitability of human suffering? Or do you follow the example from Rose's wonderful story and start to uncork some of those bad boys and see if there's something that you can do to help? I love the way David Brooks put it in our opening words. We all know cases where suffering didn't break people, but broke them open, made them more caring toward and knowledgeable about the suffering of others. In the same piece, Brooks points out that this doesn't mean that those who have suffered should go out giving sermons and lectures. We all know the weaknesses of words in these circumstances. But having tasted desolation, those who have suffered do powerfully sit with others in their desolation. Though it is hard, let us try to reframe our own suffering and begin to see it not so much as a burden, but as a motivation to really see other people and the ways in which they struggle. It is through our empathy, our superpower as human beings, that we will find our way off of our desert islands. May it be so.
Good morning yet again. You have just heard Chris talk about Message in a Bottle at a very personal level. I'm going to take it in a different direction and try to talk from a more global perspective. The recent blockbuster movie Dune offers a good starting point. The reason it makes a good starting point is that it prompts us to go back and read the book by Frank Herbert. The movie itself was unfortunately stripped of nearly everything that would allow you to understand the plot and themes of the novel. Dune, the book, is about many things, but among them are the importance of social structure and tradition and the power that these can give to a society. At another level, it is about what constitutes good government and what is a good use of power, both in the immediate present and on timescales much longer than a single human life. Dune, along with the two sequels, Dune, Messiah, and Children of Dune, tells the story of Paul Atreides and the empire he launched from the planet Arrakis, or Dune. When Paul first arrives on Dune as a youth of 15, he encounters the Fremen, a people who have adapted over many generations to life in the desert and have managed to keep themselves isolated and largely hidden from the rest of the universe. The Fremen are a people of tradition, laws, and integrity. These traditions and laws enable the people to live together in close quarters, in a harsh environment, and with extremely limited resources, particularly water. The scarcity of water dominates all facets of Fremen life. The overriding need is the good of the tribe. Individuals are valued and are expected to find happiness within the constraints of tribal life, yet are also expendable. The Fremen explicitly live by social Darwinism in a system in which the weak are constantly being weeded out. Death and violent death are normal parts of Fremen life. The harsh environment demands harsh customs. Tribe members will risk or even sacrifice their lives to support one another. Tribal succession and other matters are settled by fights to the death. Outsiders are killed as a matter of course. And yet there's also honesty and trust born of necessity. Stilgar, a Fremen leader, says, out here in the desert, when a person says something, that's the contract. The Fremen have a kind of nobility. They are independent, self-reliant, and empowered within the limits of their society. Duncan Idaho, one of the Atreides family warriors, says, they are magnificently alive. I've never met a greedy Fremen. 25 years later, there are plenty of greedy Fremen. There are also obsequious followers, foppish courtiers, and even traitors. Backed by the Fremen, Paul has become emperor. The Fremen religion no longer serves the spiritual needs of the tribe, but is instead used to manipulate the populace and to maintain imperial power. Water has become abundant, and the Fremen are no longer confined to their siege caves, but live instead in cities and freestanding houses. Vast amounts of money and power flow through Dune, and the Fremen have lost their way. Instead of giving purpose to their lives, the Empire has robbed them of their purpose. Many of them long to return to the old ways. This highlights the tension between the levels at which societies are organized. At the most local level, there is connection and fulfillment. But as government becomes larger, it becomes increasingly removed from the people. Alienation and loneliness follow. The Fremen are diminished in their identities, their convictions, and their moral standing. And yet the old ways and the old days were far from perfect. The Fremen were never greedy because in their tightly constrained lives, there was no opportunity for greed. Though they were unified in siege culture, the Fremen as a whole saw themselves as always the victims of oppression. Among themselves, they would end a dispute by saying, nothing has happened, nothing to forgive, one of the many ways a tribe kept peace in its ranks. However, of the wrongs in their past, they would say, never to forgive, never to forget. Alienated from the rest of humanity, they were waiting for a Messiah to lead them to freedom, even while they followed their leaders in a generations-long plan to bring water to Arrakis. So, what does Dune have to offer us in terms of hope for happiness and fulfillment? I suggest three things: living in a society with a shared purpose, living sustainably, and experiencing a direct physical connection to the world. The Fremen have the shared purpose, the twin goals of freedom from oppression and making their planet a better place in which to live. They have learned to live in and with the desert. They eat, drink, make homes, and travel by taking what the desert gives them. They grow and harvest their own food, manufacture their own products, and tend desert plants that otherwise could not survive. Their religion and values are built around the harsh necessities of desert life and the simplicity and purity of that life. They sustain the desert while they live in it. Direct physical engagement with the world is a basic human need. In the early days of artificial intelligence research back in the 1960s, when mainframe computers were still less powerful than my Timex watch, there were bold predictions about how the intelligence and capabilities of computers would rapidly grow until, in the words of Marvin Minsky, if we're lucky, they might decide to keep us as pets. We heard some other AI predictions in the first reading, none of which panned out as expected and most of which we're still waiting for. In 1972, Hubert Dreyfus responded to these claims in his book, What Computers Can't Do, which cut through the hype and unsparingly listed the limitations of AI systems of the time. His main argument was that computers, unlike animals, do not grow up with a body, and so they have no way of learning about the physical world other than being explicitly programmed to do something. And unfortunately, the real world throws up infinite challenges. Dreyfus was clearly right about this, as shown by some of the successes and many failures of AI systems since then. In recent years, it's become widely accepted that our feelings and emotions, for example, far from being mere distractions from pure reason, are actually the activities of extremely complex systems that help to streamline our encounters with reality and provide shortcuts to help us make good decisions. Virtual reality and social media are popular these days, and tech companies do all they can to boost their usage. The recent movie Don't Look Up dramatizes some of the consequences. Social media lead to a focus on trivia and distractions and an empty existence, while virtual reality breeds a cycle of dependence in which the answers to problems in the real world are increasingly provided by the virtual world. It all comes crashing down when the comet hits. An incisive and entertaining rebuttal to the lures of virtual reality and social media comes from Dr. Seuss. In his book, I Had Trouble in Getting to Sala Salou, he has a character who gets tired of his troubles, stumbling on a rock, getting bitten by several nuisance creatures, and accepts the offer of a traveler to go with him to the city of Sala Salou, where they never have troubles, at least very few. Getting to Sala Salou leads to encounters with a whole new list of troubles and obstacles, and at the end, our hero declines the opportunity to go on to Boulaboo Ball, where they never have troubles, no troubles at all. Instead, he returns home and prepares to deal with his troubles instead of running away from them. But I've bought a big bat. I'm all ready, you see. Now my troubles are going to have troubles with me. All of this is to say that directly engaging with the real world is essential for our thinking, our emotions, our mental health. Or, as in my second reading, it can be a life-changing experience that shakes you to the very depths of your being. Virtual reality and artificial intelligence won't do it. Tech companies understand humans well enough to manipulate us, but not enough to nourish us. America should be in a great place right now. Many of us are looking forwards, and there is no lack of shared purposes if we want to adopt them. Social justice, equality, preserving the environment and biodiversity, acknowledging and celebrating human diversity in our own country and around the world. Growing numbers of people are finding both old and new ways to engage with the physical world through activities such as gardening, baking, hiking, enjoying nature, crafts such as woodworking, pottery, weaving, and many others. We do have some issues with our form of government, but as the optimists say, where the people lead, the government will follow. Unfortunately, many are also looking backward to times when our shared purposes were tied to war and manifest destiny, when society valued conformity over diversity, and when the sharing was only for the privileged. These are uneasy times, and there's a great disconnect between those looking backwards and those looking forwards. Where do you fall into all of this? If you're a regular participant in our services, and particularly if you were here last week, you already know a big part of the answer. Over and over we talk about mindfulness, appreciation of nature, moments of joy, and many, many ways of engaging with the world. We mostly tend to look forwards. How about shared purpose? Do we have one? And if so, what is it? UUs are good community folks, but we're notably diverse in our backgrounds, personalities, inclinations, and beliefs. We are independent in our thinking and can be stubborn and fractious when pushed in different directions. How then can we have a shared purpose? We like to say that we're interested in the questions more than the answers, but I think this misses a key point. I believe our bond is not so much in the questions, but in deeply shared values, and the understanding and acceptance of the diversity of ways in which those values are expressed. Those values center on building a better world by treating people well, living sustainably, and helping out as we're able. We value action, not just belief, and beliefs can be broad, but actions, if they're going to be effective, need to be focused. And so we do focus in many different ways and in many different directions. But they all come from a common source. Thank you, and now please enjoy our hymn being sung by our choir director, Benjamin Hansen.
What wondrous love is this, O my soul, O my soul? What wondrous love is this, O my soul? What wondrous love is this that brings my heart such bliss, and takes away the pain of my soul, and takes away the pain of my soul. When I was sinking down, sinking down, sinking down, when I was sinking down, sinking down, when I was sinking down beneath my sorrow's ground, friends to me gathered round, O my soul, O my soul, friends to me gathered round, O my soul. To love and to all friends I will sing, I will sing. To love and to all friends I will sing. To love and to all friends who pain and sorrow mend, with thanks unto the end I will sing, I will sing. With thanks unto the end I will sing.
Our closing words today come from the Anthropocene Reviewed by John Green, a collection of essays, each of which offers a movie critic-style review of a different subject. In his one-star review of viral meningitis, he writes, "The challenges and responsibility of personhood, it seems to me, is to recognize personhood in others, to listen to others' pain and take it seriously, even when you yourself cannot feel it. That capacity for listening, I think, really does separate human life from the quasi-life of a virus." And now, please join us as we extinguish our chalice.
We extinguish our chalice with these shared words written by Unitarian Universalist Minor Reverend Elizabeth Sally Jones. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.